Toasts are usually about the future, but I can't help but look back at the bride's colorful past. We had some wild times, didn't we?
Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud.
It was supposed to be the saddest wedding in Las Vegas history. Two kids walked into a small, dingy chapel in the middle of the Nevada desert in 1981. The bride wore a simple white dress she bought on sale. The groom wore a suit his father had worn 30 years before. They had $200 to their names. No flowers, no music, no guests, just a tired-looking minister, a dusty chapel that smelled like old carpet, and a dream so small that even mentioning it out loud felt embarrassing. Tommy and Maria had been saving for 5 years to get married. 5 years of working double shifts. 5 years of skipping meals. 5 years of telling their families they couldn't come because they couldn't afford the plane tickets for them to visit. And this little chapel with peeling paint and a broken air conditioner. This was their wedding day. They knew it would be forgotten in minutes. They knew that in a city famous for grand celebrations, their wedding would be nothing more than a sad story told at bars where sad people tell sad stories. But then something happened that changed everything. Something that proved that magic doesn't come from money. It comes from the human heart. What happened next will remind you why kindness matters. Like and subscribe so you never miss stories about ordinary people having extraordinary moments. The story of two dreamers. To understand this story, you need to know who Tommy and Maria were. They weren't celebrities or rich kids. They were ordinary Americans doing what millions of people do, trying to build a life together from nothing. Tommy was 26 years old when he met Maria. He worked as a busboy at a restaurant on the Strip. Every day he'd watch rich people come in, spend thousands of dollars on a meal, and never appreciate any of it. They complained about the temperature. They sent food back. They snapped their fingers like the staff were dogs. But Tommy kept smiling. Tommy kept working. Because Tommy had a dream. Maria was 24 when she first saw Tommy. She was a housekeeper at a hotel, cleaning rooms day after day while tourists trashed them and left tiny tips that barely covered the gas to drive to work. She had a high school education and a big heart. She also had a dream. Their dream was simple. Get married, buy a small house, have kids, build a normal life together. In Las Vegas, that kind of dream was almost revolutionary. Everyone around them was chasing big money, big fame, big fortune. But Tommy and Maria just wanted enough. Enough to be comfortable. Enough to be happy. Enough to build something that would last. 5 years of sacrifice. When Tommy proposed to Maria in 1976, he did it in the simplest way possible. He saved up $50 and bought a gold-plated ring from a pawn shop. He took her to the beach, California, not far from where they both had relatives. He got down on one knee and asked her to marry him. Maria cried. Not sad tears, happy tears. She said yes immediately. But there was one problem. They had no money for a wedding. So they did what working-class people have always done, they saved. Penny by penny. Dollar by dollar. Maria would take extra shifts and put the money in a jar. Tommy would work 7 days a week and add whatever he could. They lived in a tiny apartment. They shared one car. They ate rice and beans most nights. Their families offered to help, but Tommy and Maria were proud. They wanted to do this themselves. They wanted to earn their wedding the same way they would earn their life, through hard work and dedication. For 5 years this continued. 5 years of sacrifice. 5 years of watching other couples get married in big ceremonies while they saved their nickels and dimes. 5 years of people asking, "When are you two getting married?" And having to say, "When we can afford it." By 1981, they'd saved up $200. That was it. $200 to create a memory that would last forever. The cheapest wedding in Las Vegas. Las Vegas is not a city that celebrates poverty. It's a city built on the opposite, on the celebration of excess. Endless buffets, massive casinos, shows that cost thousands to produce. Vegas is where rich people come to feel rich, and poor people come hoping to become rich. A wedding in Las Vegas could cost anywhere from $1,000 to $1 million. But Tommy and Maria had $200. They found a chapel that advertised the cheapest weddings in Las Vegas. The place was exactly as sad as it sounds. The chapel was located in a strip mall between a pawn shop and a laundromat. The walls were painted a shade of beige that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1965. The carpet had stains that probably told stories about 100 other small, sad ceremonies. The minister who ran the place seemed tired. Not tired like he'd had a long day, tired like he'd had a long life. He'd married thousands of people, and very few of them seemed happy. He'd seen the drunken Vegas weddings. He'd seen the regretful divorces. He'd seen the whole sad cycle of human relationships played out in his little chapel. When Tommy and Maria came in, the minister barely looked up from his desk. "That'll be $200, he said flatly. "Ceremony takes about 10 minutes. Tommy handed over an envelope with $200 in cash. It was everything they had. Everything they'd worked for 5 years. The minister counted it and nodded. "You want flowers?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "No," Tommy said quietly. "Music?" "No. Guests." "Just us," Maria said softly. The minister sighed. He'd done this hundreds of times. Poor kids, big dreams, small budgets. He would perform the ceremony. He would fill out the paperwork. They would leave. He'd never see them again. It was just another Wednesday afternoon in Las Vegas. The moment before magic. As Tommy and Maria changed into their wedding clothes in the back of the chapel, they tried to stay positive. But deep down they both felt it, the sadness of the moment. This wasn't how weddings were supposed to be. This wasn't the dream they'd imagined as children. Maria looked at herself in a broken mirror. The white dress was nice enough, but it was clearly off the rack. There was a small stain on the hem that she tried to get out but couldn't. She'd done her own hair because she couldn't afford a salon. Her makeup was drugstore brand. Tommy looked at his borrowed suit and felt ashamed. Here he was, about to marry the love of his life, and he could barely afford to look nice. They heard the minister cough in the other room. That was their signal. Time to get married. The chapel was empty except for the minister and a woman who worked at the chapel, probably required to be a witness since no one else was coming. The minister stood at the altar with a thick book of ceremonies. He didn't smile. He didn't make eye contact. Tommy and Maria walked down the aisle together. There was no music, just the sound of their footsteps on the cheap carpet, and the hum of a struggling air conditioner. The weight of unfulfilled dreams. As the minister opened his book, Tommy felt the weight of everything they'd sacrificed. 5 years. That was a long time. 5 years when his friends were getting married in beautiful ceremonies. 5 years when Maria's family asked when they would finally have a real wedding. 5 years of saving every penny. And for what? So they could stand in this sad chapel with a tired minister and no one to celebrate with them? The minister began reading from his book in a monotone voice. The words were mechanical. They had no life in them. He wasn't even trying to make the ceremony meaningful. He was just going through the motions the way he'd gone through them 1,000 times before. Maria's eyes were starting to tear up. Not happy tears but sad tears. She was thinking about her mother in Puerto Rico who couldn't afford to come. She was thinking about Tommy's family who would probably find out about the wedding from a phone call weeks later. She was thinking about how unfair it was that love should cost money. Tommy reached over and squeezed her hand, but even his hand was shaking. He was nervous. Not nervous about marrying Maria. He was absolutely certain about that. He was nervous about everything else. About whether they'd made a mistake. About whether they should have waited. About whether this sad little ceremony was insulting to the love they felt for each other. The minister reached the point where he was supposed to ask if anyone objected to the union. He said it like he was reading a grocery list. Then something happened. The chapel door opened. The man in the tuxedo. A man walked into the chapel. He was older, probably in his 60s. He wore an expensive tuxedo that probably cost more than Tommy and Maria's entire apartment. He had slicked back dark hair and a tan that suggested he spent a lot of time in the sun. The minister looked irritated at the interruption. "Sir, we're in the middle of a ceremony." "I know," the man said. "That's why I'm here." He walked down the aisle toward Tommy and Maria. As he got closer, Maria gasped. Tommy's eyes went wide. It was Dean Martin. The Dean Martin. The king of cool himself. Now you have to understand, Dean Martin wasn't just a singer or an actor. He was a legend. He was Vegas. For people in 1981, Dean Martin represented everything that was glamorous about Las Vegas. He'd performed at every major casino. He was famous. He was rich. He was cool. And he was walking toward two kids in a sad chapel, wearing a simple dress and a borrowed suit. I was passing by, Dean Martin said, his voice smooth as whiskey, and I heard there was a wedding happening. I thought I'd stop in and say hello. Tommy couldn't speak. Maria was frozen. Dean Martin walked up to the minister and extended his hand. Dean Martin, he said. The minister's jaw dropped. He probably recognized Dean Martin, but it didn't matter because he was too shocked to speak. So, Dean said, turning to Tommy and Maria, you two are getting married? Tommy finally found his voice. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, we are. What are your names? Dean asked. Tommy and Maria, Tommy said. Tommy and Maria, Dean repeated like he was testing the names. I like that. Simple. Real. So tell me, how long have you two known each other? 7 years, Maria said. She was starting to recover from the shock. We met at work. 7 years, Dean said, nodding. And you still want to marry him? Maria looked at Tommy and smiled. Every single day. Something shifted in Dean Martin's expression. He wasn't a famous entertainer anymore. He was just a man standing in a chapel witnessing love. The unexpected gift. You know what? Dean said. I think this is the most important moment I've seen in a long time. Two people who love each other, who've worked hard, who are getting married without all the phony Las Vegas nonsense. That's real. He turned to the minister. How much did they pay you? The minister hesitated. $200, sir. Dean Martin pulled out his wallet and placed a stack of bills on the lectern. It was more money than Tommy and Maria had ever seen in one place. Probably $5,000 or more. I want you to remember this moment, Dean said, looking at Tommy and Maria. I want you to remember that there are people who see you, who recognize love when they see it, who believe in second chances and hard work. He paused and his eyes were wet. I've done a lot of things in this town, he continued. I've sung to thousands of people. I've made a lot of money. I've had a lot of parties, but I haven't seen very much real love. The kind of love that makes you save for 5 years to afford $200 for a chapel. That's real love. Then Dean Martin did something extraordinary. He turned to the minister. You're going to sing at this wedding, he said. It wasn't a question. Sir, I don't. Yes, you do. Everyone sings. And if you don't, I'll sing. The minister looked terrified. I can't sing. Dean Martin smiled. Then I'll sing. The performance. Dean Martin walked to the front of the chapel. He had no band. He had no backing tracks. He had no microphone. Just his voice and his presence. And then he began to sing. He sang That's Amore, the song that had made him famous. But he didn't sing it the way people remembered it from his recordings. He sang it directly to Tommy and Maria, his eyes locked on theirs. Every word felt like it was written specifically for them in that moment in that sad little chapel. When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore, he sang, and Tommy felt tears running down his face. Maria was crying too, real happy tears now, because in that moment she understood something. Magic isn't about money. Magic is about someone seeing your life, recognizing that it matters and deciding to honor it. Dean Martin sang the entire song. When he finished, there was silence. The minister had tears in his eyes. The witness had tears in her eyes. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard, the minister said quietly. Dean Martin walked back to Tommy and Maria. He shook Tommy's hand. He hugged Maria. And then he did something that neither of them would ever forget. He whispered something in Tommy's ear. Take care of her, he said. Real love is rarer than you think. Then Dean Martin walked out of the chapel, leaving behind a memory that would last a lifetime. The minister, his voice now shaking with emotion, continued the ceremony. When he pronounced them husband and wife, the chapel erupted with applause from the witness and the minister himself, the gift that couldn't be measured. When Tommy and Maria walked out of that chapel, they were in shock. Dean Martin had given them $5,000. But that wasn't the real gift. The real gift was that he had honored them. He had seen their struggle and said, that matters. You matter. Your love matters. They used the money to buy a small house. They had 3 children. They stayed married for 52 years, until Maria passed away in 2014. Tommy lived another 3 years, always talking about that day in the chapel, the day Dean Martin changed their lives. Why this story matters. In a world that constantly tells us that money equals worth, that fame equals importance, that success equals having the most expensive things, Tommy and Maria's story reminds us of something different. Dean Martin could have ignored them. He was one of the most famous entertainers in the world. A poor couple getting married in a sad chapel in Las Vegas wasn't his responsibility. He could have walked past that chapel and never known they existed. But he didn't. Instead, he did something that our society is increasingly forgetting how to do. He stopped. He paid attention. He recognized that 2 ordinary people doing something extraordinary, building their life together through hard work and sacrifice, deserved to be honored. Dean Martin understood something that transcends money and fame. Real dignity comes from showing up for other people. Real respect comes from recognizing that struggle matters. Real success is measured not by what you have but by what you give. ***. The universal truth. This story teaches us a lesson that every generation needs to learn and relearn. When you see someone working hard, someone struggling, someone who doesn't have much but is trying their best anyway, that person deserves your respect. Tommy and Maria didn't have money. They didn't have connections. They didn't have famous last names. But they had something that most people in Las Vegas didn't have. They had each other, and they were willing to sacrifice everything for that. In a city built on excess, that was revolutionary. Dean Martin could have spent that evening performing in a casino to thousands of people. He could have been anywhere. But somehow he found himself in a tiny chapel with 2 kids in love, and he recognized the importance of that moment. The lesson isn't about being rich and helping poor people. The lesson is about being human and recognizing humanity in others. It's about understanding that someone else's wedding in a sad chapel is just as important as a $1 million ceremony. It's about knowing when to show up and when to make someone feel like they matter. What happened to Tommy and Maria? Years later, Tommy and Maria would tell this story at parties. People wouldn't believe them. They'd think it was made up, some fantasy. But Tommy and Maria had the marriage certificate, the memory, and the 52 years that followed to prove it was real. Their children grew up knowing that a stranger, a famous stranger, had believed in their parents when their parents barely believed in themselves. That man had sung at their parents' wedding. That man had said their love was real. Tommy became a manager at the restaurant where he'd worked as a busboy. Maria eventually worked her way up to running housekeeping at a hotel. They sent all 3 of their children to college. They paid off their mortgage. They lived quietly, happily, and deeply in love with each other. Every anniversary, Tommy would take Maria out and sing That's Amore to her, badly off-key but with all his heart. She would cry happy tears, the same way she cried on the day they got married. Fire the final word. Dean Martin passed away in 1995, but the impact of what he did that day in 1981 never died. It lived on in Tommy and Maria's marriage. It lived on in their children. It lived on in every story they told about the day that a legend walked into a chapel and recognized that real love was more important than anything else. If there's one thing we can learn from this story, it's this. Kindness doesn't require fanfare. Recognition doesn't need to be public. The most powerful thing one human being can do is stop and tell another human being, what you're doing matters. Who you are matters. Your love matters. In a world that constantly tells us our worth depends on our bank accounts, our social media followers, and our material possessions, Tommy and Maria's story reminds us that real value comes from somewhere else. Real value comes from love, from sacrifice, from showing up, and from choosing to honor each other's struggles. Dean Martin understood that. And on a Wednesday afternoon in a sad chapel in Las Vegas, he gave 2 ordinary people a gift that money could never buy. He made them feel like they mattered. If this story reminded you that kindness is the rarest and most valuable thing in the world, like and subscribe. Share this with someone you love. Tell them that their struggles matter. Tell them that their love matters. Because in a world full of noise and darkness, sometimes all we need is for someone to recognize that we're trying, and to say, that's enough. You're enough. The cheapest wedding in Las Vegas became unforgettable not because of money, but because of one man's choice to see 2 people's love and say it was beautiful. That's the real story. That's the real lesson. And that's why, more than 40 years later, we still remember the day Dean Martin walked into a chapel and changed everything.